Hi, I'm Julie McGowen. I'm Tom's middle child, his oldest daughter. My dad, clearly, you can just look around you and see all of the people here. What a great, great man. Not only are we surrounded by the people who loved him, who are his testimonies, but the very walls the Lord used him to build. So it's so neat to be here. My dad was so awesome, and when I thought about what I would want to share with you all in his honor, I thought, I think it would be good to maybe give people an insight into who he was, and also share what I think were one of the great secrets to his success, and how he just lived such a God-honoring life. And I think the key to that was that he was a man who lived his life according to priority. He had his priorities in life, he kept them straight, he kept them in order, and he lived his life that way. My dad's number one priority was his relationship with Jesus Christ. He was so in love with Jesus, and Jesus was in love with him too, I'm sure. My dad, he studied the Word, he meditated on it, he prayed, he loved worship, he loved singing to the Lord in his own special way. One thing Dad would say a lot is you got to keep the main thing, and Christ is the main thing. And Dad kept Christ the main thing. Jesus was his number one, and he never wavered. One thing I loved about my dad is he was such an eloquent pastor with such a deep faith, but it was real. He lived it. He lived it every day of his life. And he and God were close, and he went through so much. And I remember about 3 years ago, after he'd gone through chemotherapy, he'd gone through radiation, he'd had an emergency triple bypass, and then he'd had tumor removal surgery. And I came into the hospital to see him one morning and said, "How you doing?" He said, "Well, I've been praying a lot this morning and talking to the Lord, and I've been talking straight to him." And I said, "Well, what did you say, Dad?" And he said, I told him, "Okay, Bubba, I've had enough." And my mom promptly followed up with, "Bubba is Greek for Yahweh." But that was Dad. He and God were close, and he could talk to him like that. And the Lord heard him, and the Lord, I think, appreciated his authenticity. Dad knew that his relationship with the Lord was the most important, and that if your vertical relationship isn't straight, then your horizontal relationships are never going to be straight. And so his vertical relationship was always in good order. My dad's second priority in his life was my mom. He loved and cherished my mom so much. They had a great love story. I'm a sucker for great love stories, all the Nicholas Sparks movies, but none of those hold a candle to Tom and Julia Christian. None of them. They've been in love since they were 18 years old. They never wavered. They were each other's biggest fan. Their rule of thumb that they passed down to all of us was you never talk down your spouse. You encourage them, you love them. And Dad was always telling my mom how beautiful she was, how smart she was. He respected her, and she respected him so much. It's neat to me how my dad led so many to the Lord and was a spiritual leader for so many. But I think the person that my dad respected most on earth was my mom. He'd say to me, "Your mom and the Lord, they're tight." And when he needed words of wisdom, and he needed to hear from the Lord, and he needed help, he talked to my mom, because she has it together. In the end, in his last week, in his last days, as he was more and more in and out and sleeping a lot, I observed his inner circle just slowly tightening in. And in the last days, you could sense he wanted my mom. He wanted his Julia. And that made perfect sense to me, because that's how our family started, with the two of them, and they just loved on each other. Mom took such good care of him. She never complained. She did it with a joyful heart. She did everything for him. She was just an impeccable caretaker, and he knew it. He knew it. In the end, as Dad was taking his final breaths, we were singing to him, And Mom just gave him the greatest gift of all, I think. She told him, when you see Jesus, honey, you go, you run, because you'll be able to run, and you go. And I love you. And she just rubbed his head and told him he looked so handsome, and just, I love you. And it was truly beautiful. And just as here at his celebration dinner, he gave the blessing, may the Lord bless you and keep you to the church. My mom gave that to my dad as he passed. And it was a truly holy moment and beautiful. My dad's next priority first was Jesus, then was my mom, and then was his kids. And we're the luckiest kids ever. We had the best dad anyone could ever ask for. And not only did he have my brother Jonathan, myself, my sister Mary Beth, but he had his fabulous bonus kids, Zachary, Billy, Courtney, who he loved like his own. And boy, did we all have fun together. Dad, as much success as he had in his life, just as a pastor and as a man, he always put his kids first. He would tell us, no matter what I've got going on at church, I've always told the receptionist, if one of my kids calls, you put them through immediately. And we knew that. He never missed a soccer game. He never missed a dance recital. He would say, what good is it if I evangelize the whole world and my own kids don't know Jesus Christ? And so as a result, we all know him, and it's the greatest legacy that he's passed down. He gave us quality time, and he gave us quantity time. One thing that I'll cherish is he loved his time with his girls. He had 2 girls, Mary Beth and I, and he spent time with us doing girly things. He took us shopping, and not only did he take us, but he helped pick out the dresses. He'd throw stuff over the dressing room door saying, try this one on, and darn if half the time he didn't pick the winner. He had good taste. I'd need to get makeup, and I remember us going to the Clinique counter, and I needed just some eyeshadow or foundations, and so he did that the only way he knew how he did everything, just carefully and methodically, and said, okay, well then let's see all the shades. And before we left, he had every shade up and down his wrist because he said, you need to see what they look like on skin. And so he had them all up and down his arm to make sure we got the right ones. And I'll never forget how much it meant to me to be able to go on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, to Israel, with my dad. That was just one of the coolest things that he did, how he took groups. And one of my favorite things is I'd been dating my now husband, Zachary. We've been dating maybe a month or 2, kind of getting serious, but I liked him a lot. And I was staying in the room with Dad, and Dad just says to me, this one's going to the altar. You're in love. And I said, well, I don't know. How do you know that? And he just had that Pastor Tom smile, and he said, because I have the gift of prophecy today. And he was right. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out how much he loved his Zachary and how he knew that Zach took care of the family and took care of the church. And I'm so proud to be his wife. And to the very end, Dad was so proud of Zachary. On Sunday, Mom had the live stream of Sunday Alive playing, and Dad was pretty much out of it and asleep. But in the middle of the sermon, Dad all of a sudden, with Zachary preaching, Dad says, "Lives are being changed. Lives are being changed." And then my dad's 4th priority that I'd have to mention is the church. He loved the church. He loved FPC Haines City. His heart was always with this church. I mean, he was nuts about his people. He just loved every one of you. I mean, we'd have to drag him out of here on Sundays to try to get some lunch because he just loved you so much. And he always wanted what was best for the church. It was never about him. It was always about God and loving people. In the end, when he was asked to resign, and it was handled quite hurtfully, Dad just complied because he wanted to preserve the peace and the unity of the church. And the peace and the unity were his number 1 priority. He loved this church so much that he could turn the other cheek and just let the Lord work. He was such a great pastor. He was vibrant. He was joyful. FPC was a happy church because they had a happy pastor. In the end, you really see what's on a person's heart. And Dad talked about the church when he was in and out. He'd just randomly say things. He'd say, just out in clear blue sky, Mike really nailed it on that anthem. And one time he said, they're right about Courtney. She's doing a great job with the children's ministry. Just out of the clear blue sky, he'd say these things. One time I heard him in there mumbling something about the Methodists. I don't know what that was. But he talked about the church. He loved the church. He was a pastor through and through. It was in his blood. And he loved the church. He, just till the end, he just knew the purpose of the church that I hope FPC can continue is that it's a hospital for the sick and that it's all about loving people, and that's what we need to keep doing. My dad, his top four there with his Jesus, his Julia, his kids, and his church. And the last thing I just have to mention is what a sweet grandfather he was to my little guy Caleb. He only had 15 months with him, but it was just bliss. And as awesome of a pastor and dad and husband as my dad was, I think he really was in his element as a grandfather. He was Caleb's sweet pop, and Caleb was nuts about him. I think Caleb felt like, he gets me, he's on my level. And Caleb was the last person who Dad talked about as he was in and out in his last day or two. He'd just say these sweet things. He just said, he's such a handsome boy. And then another time he said, he's so sweet-natured. He just loved that little man. And that little man and the future children to come are the future of our family, and they'll carry on the legacy that we'll pass on for Dad. My dad's body may have lost the battle to cancer, but we all know that our battle is not against flesh and blood. Our battle and our purpose is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. And Dad won that battle, and he's enjoying the victory right now in heaven. Thanks.